Okay, we're doing final word protocol. I'm going first. Okay, so if you guys want to follow along, Act 5, Scene 1. This is Prospero. He says, "Behold, Sir King, the wrong Duke of Milan, Prospero. For more assurance that a living prince does not speak to thee, I embrace thy body, and to thee and thy company I bid a hearty welcome." And then a few lines later, he says, "First, noble friend, let me embrace thine age, whose honor cannot." So this occurs towards the end of the play when Prospero wants to go back to Milan. So he's embracing Alonso again, who was the one that kind of phased him out. Him and Antonio phased him out. So he's embracing them again and saying, like, "I forgive you and I want to go back with you to Milan to be the Duke again." And when he got kicked out, they kicked him out because he kind of forgot about his job, and Antonio just wanted to he was really power hungry. So Prospero pretty much just said, "I'll go back with you, and because I want to be the Duke again, I won't harm you." So I think we can agree that since they kicked him out, he could have easily been super mean to them and killed him and tortured them for a long time, but he got them back to the island with him where he was exiled to. Oh yeah, the theme is forgiveness. So, thanks. So yeah, that's the theme. I forgot to say that. So that's just really important because without that theme and without that occurring, it would have just been Prospero torturing them, which would not have been entertaining or been much of a story. So yeah, the forgiveness and reassurance is... Wait. Come on. Okay, so that and Prospero just... Yeah. He embraces them. So he embraces them again, and it's just super important. It's just super important to the novel and the play, because without that, it wouldn't progress. And Prospero wants to go back, and if the theme wasn't forgiveness, and it was just like get revenge for what they did to you, it wouldn't have been a good play for that reason. So Prospero not getting revenge and being embracing and nice and kind to them is just almost most of the novel, and is the most important part because it progresses it.
Alright, so yeah, I agree with you. Like the theme of forgiveness is really important, and it kind of makes the story what's so different, because you expect Prospero just to go off on everyone, because I mean he has all the right to go off on them because they exiled him with his daughter, took his job, and he's just been alone on the island. But the fact that he did forgive them, that shocked me, and it's just a really good moment of the play, and the overall theme of forgiveness, I think that's what makes the Tempest so unique, because we all were thinking that he was just gonna kill them with his magic or something, and then when he just turned around and forgave them, and then they gave him his job back because he forgave them, I think that's really cool. So yeah, I think the overall theme of forgiveness is really good, and that was an excellent theme choice, David.
So, I really like the theme of forgiveness because, as you said, it does progress the novel. Because if Prospero did not bring this theme into the light, he could have, like the audience thought he wasn't going to, because he had all the right for him to kill everybody who betrayed him. But he forgave everybody, and the story could have ended at the beginning scenes where the boat of the nobles was caught in the storm. But it didn't, which then would later progress the story, knowing how the plot of all the nobles played out and how Prospero would end up forgiving them for what they did. and he would eventually become Duke of Milan again.
Okay, I think that forgiveness was, definitely one of the main themes, and I think is one of the best themes in the book. Because, it does clash with your thoughts of, hey, this man has lost everything to these people, and he's going to forgive them. And, when I, first noticed this, I was like, wait, how is this book a comedy? And then I looked it up, so I'm just going to, the definition of comedy is a literary genre and a type of dramatic work that is amusing and satirical in its tone, which I don't really think the book was, but this last part is kind of proves that it kind of shows how Shakespeare kind of likes to push the boundaries. And then most having a cheerful ending. It did kind of have a cheerful ending of forgiveness. I don't know how I feel about it being a comedy, but it really was, forgiveness. It's kind of somebody's story of hardships and pain just to come back and, give an ultimate kindness to these people. So I think it was a good choice too.
Yeah, I agree with the theme of forgiveness for sure. And one thing going off what Will said when he says when he says forgiveness. I said, but when he says comedy or tragedy, I think really the comedy portion is the fact that it didn't go poorly and it didn't no one ended up dead or anything, as opposed to a tragedy being very murderous. Very murderous. And for the theme for the forgiveness, it's amazing how what it took for Prospero to not respond to Antonio and his brother, and which really sets a lesson and being the theme of what you take away from the story. I think that's a really positive thing to take away from any story.
Yeah, I like your idea about how it's a lesson and it tells you to do this thing. Because for him, it works out in the end. He could have hurt them, but he decides not to, which gives him the outcome that he wants. He wants his dukedom back. So, Dolan, when you were thinking about a comedy and you were thinking about at the end, I didn't really understand how that was a comedy. But I understood that it was a good ending. So yeah, just want to make a point off of that. And then, as what you said I like how you said that you expected him to go off, because that's how a lot of these plays go. Someone was wrong, they want to do something about it, but he handles it in a more genuine way, genuine measure, I guess, than what a lot of plays do at this time. So I like what you said, how it just shows the difference, in his mindset.
Alright,
I apologize for laughing.
so here's the part that I chose. It's kind of a little before Alonso finds Ferdinand, and then once he does find Ferdinand. So it starts with Miranda saying, "Yes, for a score of kingdoms you should wrangle, and I would call it fair play." And Alonso replies, "If this prove a vision of the island, one dear son shall I twice lose." And then Alonso says, after he sees Ferdinand, he's like, "Now all the blessings of a glad father compass thee about. Arise, and say how thou camest here." So that's Anagarus, because, Anagarus by definition is a moment in a play or other work when a character makes a critical discovery. And after Alonso he thought Ferdinand died ever since when they arrived on the ship, because they jumped off and got separated. And so that's huge, because Ferdinand is one of the major parts of Alonso's life. So once he finds him, I think that's a really big moment, because reuniting a son and father after all that time lost, it's just a really big impact of the play. And it's also important because once Alonso discovers Ferdinand is alive, Ferdinand then tells him how him and Miranda are in love. And so that's also crucial to the play, because when Miranda and Ferdinand both tell their parents they declare their love for each other and they want to get married, that kind of acts as a peace treaty between Prospero and Alonso, because it's their two dearest things, their children, and it just kind of unites them and kind of makes them forgive each other. So I think that's a good Anagnorius. And it's just, I think the play, it wouldn't be the same if Ferdinand had stayed dead, because first of all, Alonso wouldn't be happy. He wouldn't have been as happy. He probably wouldn't have forgiven Prospero just because like his son was dead. They didn't really have any connection anymore. Miranda would probably not be an important character. She'd probably still be miserable because she didn't really have anyone or anything. And I don't know if Prospero would have forgiven them, Alonso and Antonio, because, as I said earlier, Ferdinand and Miranda kind of marrying and loving each other, that kind of unites them at the end. So if Ferdinand wasn't there at all, I think the play could have taken a whole different direction and not a good forgiveness theme ending. But yeah, so I think that's a good Anagnorus. And what I question you guys is, as I was saying, what do you think would have happened if Ferdinand wasn't a part of the play, if Alonso didn't make that critical discovery, and how it would have kind of changed the end of the play or just changed the play as a whole? So that's what I asked.
Yeah, that was a good question of how, if we found out Ferdinand wasn't alive, how that would affect the play. Considering Ferdinand, the whole marriage of Ferdinand was what set up the play entirely. That's what their voyage was on. And if he didn't die, and if he died, then it would have changed the outcome entirely, because now Miranda would have nobody that she would significantly love, which she previously did, which I find is the reason why this would be an Anagnorus, because this is a critical point that would have altered the story entirely, considering that Ferdinand and Miranda's love would unite the two families together.
Okay, Matthew. I really, to answer your question, what do you think would happen if Ferdinand wasn't in the play? Like you said, I think it would turn out very differently. I think the forgiveness wouldn't happen. I think that everybody on the island, Prospero would probably kill the rest of them, just because I really do think Ferdinand kind of softened his heart when he saw Miranda fall in love. An interesting thing to think about is if Ferdinand didn't reveal himself back to Alonso and the rest of them, I definitely think that Alonso and the rest of them would have more hostile feelings towards Prospero, like you said, as a peace treaty. But I do think it is one of the biggest Anagnoruses. Well, also, another Anagnorus is like Prospero breaking staff, and that's a kind of critical moment. It was a good choice.
Just like when you say Anagnorus, it's like a critical moment when like the two like characters like really find like the true identity in each other, and when Prospero draw that curtain to reveal Miranda and Ferdinand playing chess, like that, like I think it's huge to the story. Like as you guys all said, that like it's like they are the connection, they're that overlapping part that both sides share, like that like the Alonso and Antonio that like exiled Prospero, and like Prospero, like they share that love that Ferdinand and Miranda have. And like what would happen if Ferdinand wasn't with Miranda? In my opinion, I really don't think Prospero would have killed them, because like if Prospero wanted to kill them early on before he even knew Ferdinand, he would have done it on the ship and just made the ship sink. So what would happen? I would probably say, I'm running out of time, I would probably say that they would have to just go home on the ship, and it wouldn't be happy ending after for Miranda or Ferdinand.
So I really like what you picked, because I hadn't really thought, like, I knew it was an important moment at the time, but I didn't really see this when I first read it, that if they hadn't found him and if Fernando didn't explain or say his love, then, well, for the daughter of Prospero and Miranda, then Prospero and Alonso might not have been together again. They might not have made peace, which is probably the most important part of the whole play, because that's like the whole thing behind it. And then your question was what would happen if they hadn't found him? Then they probably wouldn't have gone back together anyway. So yeah, it's just a super important part and probably one of the most. So yeah, I like that. Good job.
All right. So basically, what I picked up from all that, and I appreciate you guys paying so much attention to the Anagris. Basically, you all kind of agreed that like there definitely would have been a different ending. Harrison and Will both said like, you know, Prospero probably would have killed them or like kind of been hostile. You all said they would have been hostile, but I think he would have killed him. And Jack, you said he probably wouldn't have, but would have gone back. I see what you're saying, and that could definitely be a possibility too. But what I really picked up is, yeah, everyone said they wouldn't make peace and they wouldn't reunite. So yeah, I think that just proves what a critical moment that was in the play and how impactful Ferdinand truly was for the overall story of the play. And I like how David said, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That's what I thought too, but it turns out to be one of the most critical moments.
Alright, what I'm gonna speak about today is the theme of betrayal, which is seen throughout the play. There's various occasions, but the part that I'm mostly gonna talk about is when after the crash, when Alonso, Antonio, Sebastian, and all their nobles find themselves on the island, and they're all about to go to sleep, and or they're all falling asleep, except for Antonio and Sebastian, in which Antonio speaks to Sebastian, talking about possibly murdering Alonso, who they should be loyal to, in which Antonio says, my strong imagination sees a crown dropping upon thy head, in Act 2, Scene 1. And with that, Sebastian and Antonio start to pick up their swords to about to slaughter Alonso, but Alonso and the other nobles are woken up by strange noises, or woken up, and Antonio and Sebastian just say that is strange noises that woke them up, that they're trying to protect them from, and that's why they have their swords in their hands, trying to save themselves. But this act of betrayal is not only the theme of betrayal is not only seen in this part, but it's also seen back when we figure out that Prospero got exiled from Milan, or exiled from dukedom, because they didn't think he was that great of a duke, but still they should have been loyal to him, spoke to him instead of exiling him, and in which the noble Alonso took over his place. So betrayal in this book really furthers the plot, because you never know who to trust and never know what is going to happen. Like at the point of which Antonio and Sebastian were about to betray Alonso, people thought, the audience would have thought, well, what happens if they end up going through with the plan? Is somehow miraculously Alonso wakes up, which he did. How would that shake up? Would Antonio betray Sebastian to go and try to be Duke himself, or will Antonio stay loyal, which he hasn't been the whole book?
I think that was a really good point, Harry. But yeah, the theme of betrayal is everywhere in the book. And one of the two kind of like instances that are also, you know, related to the theme of betrayal are, you know, when Caliban runs away and meets with the two shipwrights, and then they plot to kill Prospero. That's another kind of instance of betrayal. But and then I guess kind of a micro one that you could consider betrayal, that, you know, is Ferdinand and Miranda's love. because the two parties, or at least their parents, are kind of, warring. They warred in the past, and they, kind of are now after they just got stranded. But it's kind of their love. Like Ferdinand went against probably what his parent wanted him to do, and that's kind of Romeo and Juliet thing. But it was just, I think betrayal is very persistent. It's a big theme, and yeah.
One thing in that quote where you said something on what is this crown that I see by before me, that to me has like striking similarities to like Macbeth and the dagger soliloquy. So like that was interesting because like it was like, and it's the same idea where it's like the characters are power hungry and they want to kill a king so they can get power. Obviously different outcomes where one is murdered and one isn't, but that's similar. And then also like how like Alonso's loyal men betrayed him, and they would have successfully betrayed him if it weren't for Prospero or Ariel, who's this Prospero's servant. But like in contrast, like Prospero's servants, they want to betray him, but they can't. So like it's like interesting seeing how Prospero's servants can't betray him, and if they did, like it would go poorly for them. But Alonso's like almost can, if it weren't for Prospero, and I think it really shows Prospero's power in Magic.
So I really like what you picked because it shows the degree of uncertainty throughout the book, and it always leaves mystery up to the reader because when something happens, you don't expect what probably will end up happening. So that's a super important thing in the book, and I just think that kind of makes it what it is. So that's very important. And then also what you were saying, I like what you said about like the warring families and how it's like Romeo and Juliet and how that's betrayal. But I kind of disagree with that too, because if the families weren't like against each other, and Miranda didn't like Ferdinand, then the two families probably wouldn't have made up. So just going back to yours, what you were saying about betrayal, that just kind of makes the book and the play so special, and how it makes it different from anything else from the time and anything that he's ever written. So I like it.
Alright, so I really like what you said, how the theme of betrayal really progresses the story and it furthers the plot, since you never know what's going to happen. Like, that's so true because you kind of have to, it's like a cliffhanger every part you read, and as you're going on, it just makes you want to read more and more. And for your question, if you said, like, would Antonio betray Sebastian or something, I don't think so, since then they'll both be, like, at their top, like, Antonio would be Duke, Sebastian would be King of Naples, so I think that'd work out. And I like what Jack said, how he related that to Macbeth, because yeah, I think everyone's just so power hungry. And when they said the crown was falling or something, like I kind of thought that was also like the dagger, and just how they all want that kingdom and that power. And then I'm gonna have to agree with Will that Ferdinand and Miranda's love is betrayal, just because like their parents are both fighting with each other. So I think that could be seen as betrayal.
I like how you called this theme a cliffhanger because of the uncertainty, as David said, and not knowing what will happen later. And I like how Jack compared it to other Shakespearean novels because of how important this theme is, like how it is seen in Macbeth with the dagger, talking about how most characters are power hungry, which further the plot because it's the motives of these characters. Because if everybody was passive, then there would not be conflicts. And I like how Will said that that there was betrayal of the family between Miranda and Ferdinand's family because they did not like each other, showing how although there's all of these instances of hostile betrayal and killing, that does not mean that it can't be passive like that.
Okay, first I'm going to talk about some romantic irony in the epilogue. In the epilogue, this is Prospero speaking, but I call it romantic irony because I believe this is Shakespeare speaking, because he says, he says, with the help of your good hands, and then I'm just going to skip down here. as you from crimes would pardon me, let your indulgence set me free. This is kind of, Prospero saying that, giving him an applause would set him off at the stage well. But this is really, since this is believed to be Shakespeare's last play, Shakespeare is inserting himself as, speaking through Prospero, as saying this is his last play he's going to write, and he just wants to have a good ending, and he wants people just to clap him off, and that's him inserting himself. And then I have another one that I think is in allegory, because I think it's, it's a symbol with a direct meaning, or, it could be a similar metaphor, but basically, it's when Prospero, early when he's explaining to Miranda his situation of how he got kicked out on the lawn, he says, I pray thee mark me, I thus neglecting worldly ends, all dedicated to closeness and the bettering of my mind, but by being so retired. So this means he's saying he reserved himself and neglected to, his books and bettering his craft, and that's what he did, he read books. And I think it's an allegory because it's a direct kind of symbol to Shakespeare's own feelings of how his duties as a playwright are taking him away from his families. So being so focused on writing plays or books, he's neglecting his responsibility as a father and his family back in England. And I think that's in here also because it's, one of his last before he can finally go home and be a father. And then I have a last one, which is a antithesis. An antithesis is when words or phrases are put together which oppose each other. So for this, it's in Act 5, Scene 5, when Ferdinand sees his father, he says, though the seas threaten, they are merciful. And this is an antithesis because, it says that the seas are threatening, but they're merciful. So it's an antithesis because these words oppose each other. Because it's saying that, the seas were bad, they threw us on this island, this is horrible. But they are also merciful and kind because they spared all our lives. So that's how I feel. And yeah, so, I don't really have that much, but yeah. So those three, the romantic irony, the allegory, and the antithesis. But most of the play, though, is, I kind of feel like Shakespeare giving own nods to his own situation and the reason for why he's leaving a craft he's worked so long on.
I really enjoy talking about that last quote where Shakespeare says like kind of his goodbye off the stage, and I can agree more how that's romantic irony, because I just think it's like so interesting how his legacy as a playwright just kind of ends with the Tempest and those last words through Prospero. And then for the antithesis, how I agree, it's the sea for the sailors, it says they said the sea has been has been kind of not mean, but kind of rough, but then all, at the same time that's Prospero. So it's when it says the sea has been rough, it's Prospero has caused the sea to be rough. And it's what that means for them. It's just it's kind of going on the fact about if how Prospero's power and how he made the seas rough and how they acknowledge that.
So what I liked about yours is that you included three separate things, which is, I thought that was interesting. So about the romantic irony in his last play, I also thought that was kind of interesting because most people wouldn't be like that, how he wants people to cheer for him, which is kind of interesting. And then the most important thing, what I thought about you said, was the allegory and how Prospero's duties where he was so focused on magic that it made him forget about his duties as being a duke, relates exactly to how Shakespeare was like that with his family and how he forgot about it. So I thought it was really cool how Shakespeare wanted to implement a little bit of his life and how he was similar to fictitious characters. So I thought it was really cool, especially I did 3. Nice job.
Alright, so yeah, going off what David said, I think it is really cool that you took the time to find 3 things and kind of make them all combine into one. And I like the romantic irony because I think that's it's really a cool thing how Shakespeare interjects himself as one of his own characters. And I wonder if that makes him seem like, I wonder if he thinks he's like one of his own characters or what, but I don't know. And then I like the allegory, how it's just so impactful to Shakespeare and how like it really is meant for him and how he just focused too much on his writing career, so he neglected his family. It's cool how he made Prospero do that too with his magic and his school and the dukedom. And then also, like, David, you said how you thought it was interesting that Shakespeare kind of wanted people to cheer for him. I find that interesting too, but I think he kind of deserves it for all the time he's put in. So yeah, excellent job, Will. Superb.
Yeah, I really do think that Shakespeare really deserves this round of applause, and I really like how he made his last play like a send-off play, which it really does focus on this plot of Prospero being exiled and all that, but it also has that underlying meaning of Shakespeare having this significant role in history and literature as seen as we are speaking about him today, and how his life was interjected into this play was just really amazing, because how it references Prospero's books, saying how he was all up in his books, not paying attention to anything else, like how Shakespeare wasn't with his family in the allegory.
Okay, I liked all that you guys said. I really do think that Harry brought up a good point about how important Shakespeare is to history, just literature and then history in general. But one thing I do want to make a disclaimer just in case this is, I think Shakespeare exists, but if he doesn't, it isn't technically romantic irony. But if Shakespeare the person does exist, then I think it is romantic irony. But I do agree with Matthew and Harry on the one that says Shakespeare really does deserve a reward. He put a large part of his life into this, and as you see, it took effects on him, and he kind of had a guilty conscience toward his family. And he wanted to go back. But yeah, I do think, this is his legacy. And it's kind of fitting that his legacy as a person in history is through playwriting. And, his legacy ends with words through a character that's not himself. But it kind of makes you wonder if he wrote Prospero to be like him, or did he just put that in at the end?
Alrighty, I'm going to be talking about like the motifs, and there's a few evident ones. So the dominant motif that's just constant throughout the play is water. Now it starts like the first time water starts is like it shows Prospero was so mad about, or so like he was mourning so hard about the loss of his kingdom that he said his words were. He said that he could drown a sea, like he could drown a sea with like his tears could like drown a sea or something like that. And then there's Ariel, he visits Ferdinand, and says, "Full faith and five thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those are not pearls that were those eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer of sea change into rich something strange." So this is Ariel delivering the message to Ferdinand that his father has drowned Alonso, and that it's you can't even recognize him, he's just he's gone. And so Ferdinand lost his father, thought he lost his father because of water, but then in a reverse, Alonso thought he lost his son through water. And so it's all these things are it's just constant loss through water, and so when it comes back, it's just the motif's just that water, and it's all drowning. And another motif is music, and not just music, mysterious noises on the island. Early on in the play, Caliban says this island is full of noises when describing the island that Prospero is stranded on. There's another one where some of the men on the boat talk about the storm is mighty, and the sound of the thunder and lightning is temperous, I believe. And in addition, Ariel's music is it saves Alonso, or the sounds Ariel makes, it saves Alonso when it tells him to wake up, and then when it comes it comes with the banquet. Like it said, like when the banquet's laid out in front of the king's men, the music comes to it. So it's just the constant music. And then finally, the idea that like servants and like the constant idea, it's kind of like a theme. It's like the constant idea, like that there like is like the servants and like the relationship, and like the idea of like what is fair and what's not fair, and like how like is it fair that like the constant asking of Ariel asking to be free, and like the service of the king's men to Alonso.
So, I like all the motifs that you picked. I think that they're all super crucial to the story, and especially the water one, because you were saying the different uses for it, how it does this and this. So the water aspect just makes it super important because it's used to express evil when they were talking about the water for the ship in the storm, and then also how it was used to express emotion when Prospero was upset because of the fact that he was exiled from his dukedom. And then also the noise, the music, I guess. I liked how you explained that because they use noise to explain things that are good and bad and evil, and it's just interesting to see how all this stuff is used. The same thing can be used to describe 10 different things in the novel. So I thought it was just really cool.
So yeah, Jack, I liked how you used one of your motifs as water. I think water is probably one of the most important, and you said kind of how like it kind of represents drowning, and there's constant loss through water, which there is, and that's super crucial. But water, it also kind of represents like a cleansing, like when Prospero throws all his stuff in the water, like that's kind of a revolutionary moment. Like it shows that he's changed, he's kind of a new man, he's ready to take his dukedom back. And so I think water is super crucial. And the music, I found it kind of interesting when Caliban did say the island is full of noises, because like when you're first reading, you don't know what noises, you don't know what that could even mean. And then we do learn that music, there's good music, bad music. And I think it's cool how the music comes up with the banquet and it like saves Alonso and tells him to wake it up. Because that just proves like the music was really good and it kind of helped a major part of the play as well.
Alright, so the motif of water, it's interesting how you say that water is like of drowning and loss, but it typically means like rebirth. Like as you see in Foster, when it talks about poured back into water, like such as a baptism per se, is a good example. It's talking about rebirth and cleansing, as Matthew said, which can also be seen in things like Shawshank Redemption, when he comes out and into the water and he's reborn into, he's not reborn into a new form, he's reborn into a new way of life. Like how, also how there's new, how people have reborn personalities, such as like Prospero, as he should have been mad at first, or he was mad at first, torturing them, but he ended up forgiving them and having.
Okay, about the water thing, I agree with Harry. I was going to mention that with Foster it kind of means rebirth, but yeah, it also kind of shows suffering in this one. I mean, rebirth and, because Foster also mentions how drowning, if you don't drown, then it's rebirth, but this kind of shows what the drowning can be like. But then Ferdinand is reborn in Alonso's mind when he's reintroduced. And then for the music, I think is a really big one, because I think the music and just the sounds that's played and mysterious on the island, I think it represents tone and mood, or kind of controls it, because tone's like the author's feelings towards a thing, and you know when the music's like mysterious and weird, that's kind of how the author wants you to think it is. And then, you know, when it's like joyful, when they're having the banquet, that's how it is. And it also controls our mood, because, you know, how we react to it, because if it's going to be like kind of mysterious music, we know something's about to happen, but if it's joyous, we think, oh, everything's fine, it's the banquet, you know. I think it's a very important kind of tool that Shakespeare uses.
Alright, thank you guys. So, what Dolan said, like, the music controlling tone and mood is huge. Like, on the storm, like a Tempest, Thunder and Rain that's like that supports the tone of like the tenseness of the moment. And then like when the banquet shows up, it's kind of like I envision it as like classical and happy music for the Sailors Are Happy. And then also what you said about how it is extremely similar to baptism, but like it's also different. It's like it's still the idea of a rebirth in a way, but I agree that's like it's not really as much like it's not as like positive, you know. But I also think that's part of what makes this story unique, and like it really shows the suffering of the story, like the fact that like it's like a different kind of rebirth. It's not that like it just comes up and it's not some glorious character. It's different, but it's just not like heavenly.
Joe?
All right, that's our thingy discussion.